Yanni, take it away.
Thanks, Andrew. All right, everybody, it's the last day of WOW Summit, and thanks for coming out. Thank you also to WOW Summit for graciously hosting us and for doing all the amazing work behind the scenes. I really applaud you for that. My name is Yanni Collins. I'm the Media and PR Director for Oz Living, and welcome to this fireside chat. It is very timely to be discussing this at the moment because in recent years, we've seen an explosive growth in virtual economies and the concept of virtual ownership, especially with gamers and collectors alike, purchasing and trading digital goods and digital assets for millions and millions of dollars. And this is not just happening in a gaming space, nor this is a sci-fi dream come true. This is an entirely new economy that we'll be discussing at the moment. And as technology only continues to advance, the possibilities for virtual economies and ownership is just becoming increasingly limitless, especially with blockchain and NFTs paving the way for new forms of value and ownership. Now, before we get into the specific questions, I'm so honored to be sitting down with Michael and Evan, two of the experts in this field, and also they represent the biggest and most influential companies in the blockchain gaming space. So Michael and Evan, thank you so much for being here. Let us start with your introductions. Tell us about yourself and your background.
Yeah, so I'm Evan Auyang. I'm the group president of Animoca Brands. I have, been in the company for a couple of years to look at how do we scale the organization, sharpen the strategy, make some investments, build some great products. Right, we have three pillars. We have the operating arm and the sandbox. Sebastian is one of our early subsidiary companies. We have 400 in our portfolio. That's the investment side. That's our pillar two. So we have two funds. One early stage, one is a growth stage fund. And then we also do advisory services.
Fantastic. And Evan?
And I'm Michael, and I'm the CEO of Xterio. Xterio is a Web3 game publishing platform. I myself have been in the game industry for more than 20 years and publishing all kinds of games from PC and MMORPGs to the latest strategy games on mobiles in China and outside of China as well. And it's very excited to be here together with Yanni and also Evan.
All right, let us start with the first question and with the market overall. How do you see the concept of ownership evolving and changing the landscape of the video game industry? Let's start with that.
Well, the landscape, obviously, Michael have a very strong point of view on that because he's building a platform, right, ultimately. But for us, we really see in the way we look at games, and we began as a sort of like a mobile gaming cover a builder, right? And then we sort of venture into the blockchain space because we believe that ultimately digital asset ownership is really ultimately what's going to be the future of what we see. So about 2017, late 2017, we started distributing crypto kitties, and we discovered that digital asset ownership is what people actually ultimately want, right? And the future of gaming and video games, we believe that is ultimately ownership of time that you actually would want to value. And given that, you don't want your data to be necessarily mined and be just utilized, and your time to be just used for entertainment. You want to use it, put it in good use, and if you're putting time into it, you should have a slice of where your contributions are. So our version of the Web3 world is that once you own digital asset, you can obviously freely compose upon that, and obviously you own by having a piece of that governance. You have that. You have the right to participate. You have the right to vote. Eventually, I think these ecosystems all become DAOs. And we believe that's a much better vision of the internet as we see it.
Beautiful said. And Michael?
Yes, I think the only thing I want to add is that even in the Web 2 world or traditional game world, there are a lot of games that people find that ownership is very important. For example, there is a game called CSGO, which has been around for many, many years. If you look at the news, CSGO's some of the weapons are being sold in the marketplace for more than $100,000. I think the main reason for that is that people trust the platform or trust the game that is continue to be run or continue to be operated. So there has always been demand for gamers to have actual ownership of the games or game items on the digital assets. But what is lacking is that a lot of the games has not been operated for a very long time, and they kind of close down, or something happened, or there are not many players in it. Then they will found that digital assets become value to become lose values. So I think with blockchain and with Web3, we can make sure that the trust and then the longevity of these games will be there forever, and also preserving the values of the ownership of these games items.
Yeah, just building on top of this, I am a gamer myself. I've been playing video games for years, and just sometimes I feel like those in-game assets are mine, but technically it's not, right? But like the blockchain gaming allows me to have and take ownership for those in-game assets, and that is verifiably mine. So I think that's the value of ownership in there. Let's go to the next question. One of the biggest challenges facing in-game economies is the increasing complexity of a variety of virtual currencies, like items and other assets that can be traded or sold within the game, making it difficult for players to understand the true value of these assets. And so from a high-level perspective, how can we ensure that players are able to make informed decisions about the value of virtual assets, and what role can technology and data analytics play in creating a more transparent and fair system? Let's start with Evan.
Sure. I mean, so we obviously have many assets, and we are really in charge of focusing on the economies, right? Ultimately, the question that you're asking pertains to how do you balance gaming economic systems, right? And these really are economic systems, and it's not really just about blockchain cryptocurrencies that these economies exist. In fact, in Web2 gaming ecosystems, those still exist. The economies of those gaming systems also need to balance, right? But once you connect the crypto layer to it, where you can actually take things out and externalize, and there's real discoverable value that can connect to real world, then you have that layer of market volatility in it that you have to deal with, right? I mean, many of the ecosystems that we have seen that has not really worked out perfectly really has to do with the sinks and the faucets that we talk about, right? So, what do you have? Are you inflationary, deflationary? Do you have way too much faucet relative to sinks? And there are even some projects that are really on the OG scale, like for instance, like even CoCats, etc., that have unlimited emission and all that. There needs to be those aspects need to be fixed as well, right? But if you look at overall ecosystems that have actually tended to have done well in the beginning, it's more to do with the supply and demand ultimately. It's again sinks in the faucets. That's to do with that. If you have more uses for it, you would naturally have an appreciation of that particular token, right? And if the token or utility itself doesn't attract players, or it just becomes a thing that is kind of like a short-term phenomenon, then you see the volatility coming up or down, right? So for us, ultimately, we do advisory services, right? Token advisory. We look at the overall balance. You put it through different models, economic models, to see how it actually balances. And you actually have to run it through different models to see. And there are external vendors that can then actually allows you to run through models, right? But ultimately, the way we look at it is that for these game economies to balance, it really cannot be just be built on pure speculation, right? Because you're trying to get a community going, right? And that community is invested in this space, which means that you invest in that space by your time and capital as well, but you don't look to immediately take it out. So play to earn has really evolved into play and earn as a result, right? So that's sort of how we see as the future.
How about you, Michael? What's your perspective on this?
Yeah, I can add something as well. I think at the end of the day, it's about transparency, right? Assuming that we can see real-time numbers of the treasury of, let's say, Credit Suisse or SVB, then people will know what is going to happen next, right? And people will be, transparency is everything. So I think the best thing about blockchain or Web3 is that for transparency, that we know exactly what is the treasury is like for the supply and the demand of the tokens in that game or in that whatever project it is. And, we can see the velocity, we can see the number of users and many things, so on and so forth, so that people can decide, or the users can decide whether they want to continue to invest their time or money into the games, or is it time to take out their deposits.
Yeah, and one thing that is great about Web3 is that it's transparent, right? Because a lot of the data is on chain. Of course, the Web2 data is still, you can still look at it through Web2 tools, right? About engagement and all that stuff. But everything that happens to the token and assets that gets traded are all on chain, right? So it's super transparent.
Yes. I want to move on. What kind of new business models do you think will emerge as a result of in-game economies and virtual ownership? Do you want to take your first one?
Maybe I can take it first, right? So I think two of the questions that we always ask, especially for traditional game developers, is how Web3 is going to increase the experience or improve the experience of the users, and also how would that improve our business as well, right? So there are a few things that we've been looking at. For example, there is a game called Fantasy Westward Journey, which has been running around in China for more than 18 years. The idea is very simple. Because everyone is charged by hours, so all the things that you can farm or you can get inside the game has to be done by hours rather than you just pay money. So for those people who have money but no time, they will have to ask, or they will have to buy it from the farmers of these gamers, right? And also these people can use these items, or a very, very powerful weapon to be able to kill like bosses and game monsters and things like that. So it becomes a very positive loop or cycle for the rich with no time and for people who have more time, and to have a very good cycle. And this game has been running for more than 18 years, and the inflation for this game is only about 3% per year for the last 18 years. So it's, especially with Web3, I think that makes a lot more sense, because the marketplace would be more transparent, would be more liquid, and so I think it's important. It's quite possible for this kind of model. Another model that we can think of easily is that any games that requires wager. So there is a game called Escape from Tarkov in the Web2 world, where players will bring in their weapons and to fight in the section, right? And the winner is going to loot or to take the loser's weapons after the game, when they win the game, right? So these weapons obviously will become NFTs and can be traded on the secondary marketplace. I think this is one area where Web3 has actually less friction compared to Web2, because in Web2 world, most of the time people will have to send a link into something like eBay and then borrow the account, and then they may lose the account or stole the account or things like that, and it's very, very dangerous or not secure to do so. So these are just two of the examples that I can think of right now.
Yeah, I mean, the notion of interoperability is a pretty important one, right? It's why platforms are built. It's one of your visions as well. Ultimately, it's about Web3 is very open in terms of philosophy, right? So it is really about not about building that thing and then attracting the crowd in and then just kind of keep them all in. It's really about how do I create value not only for my own community, but how can I attract your community, and how do I contribute my community to the next community over as well. So if you look at just a simple project that we did, which is Mochaverse, right? Why did Animoca launch its own NFT, right? The reason we did that is because we feel that we're now large enough, our ecosystem of 400 or so companies is now large enough for us to have an NFT that represents all of us, right? And if you sort of mine the wallets that are sort of like, on who are the holders of that, and the initial drop, you can see that those who sign up are from the Bored Ape community, they're from Moonbirds, they're from Cool Cats, they're from Azuki. You can just see how these communities actually overlap. Of course, a lot of them are from our own ecosystem, like Sandbox, like from Brofish community and so on. So you can see that as you are creating that value for community, you actually see the same people. You mine the data, you can see that you're trying to create that value for the community so it's interoperable. And of course, it's just the beginning, but you can see that what we're trying to do is to have something that is out there that represents us, is unique to us, and we'll give it a lot of utility so that the ecosystem can build from there. And that representation, the NFT that we have, is really the start of how we envision the ecosystem ought to be.
Yeah, I just want to also share a success story. A month ago, there was this the top-ranked Fortnite player who cashed in $1.6 million off of like playing Dookie Dash. Basically, he ranked #1 in Dookie Dash, and he got this NFT as a prize. And guess what? A person bought it for 1,000 ETH, which is $1.6 million. So that's kind of like, also like you would see the potential from like all these success stories. Anyway, moving on. In terms of regulations, what are the potential implications of virtual ownership on intellectual property rights or copyright law and related legal frameworks? And what impact will this have on society as a whole if this eventually becomes more widely accepted and recognized legally? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the regulatory part of it is really at its nascent stages at this point in time. It's great to see, by the way, we're in Hong Kong. It's great to see that a financial hub, which is globally known in Hong Kong, first of all, we allow travel, which is a great thing, right? So it's great to see, everyone here, right, for the first time in a long time in the Web3 conference, right? And great to see that. Secondly, the Hong Kong government has sort of committed that it wants to build a virtual assets hub here, and that's a big deal because Hong Kong actually has a very strong regulatory regime in the financial space, right? It's one that is globally known, and it wants to regulate. It wants to have a piece of that. And regulation is very important because, as Animoca brands, we look at sort of KYC, AML, CTF. Those things are very, very important to us because when you have any kind of financial assets moving around, you need to have those guardrails in place in order for the whole space to grow. Whereas, unfortunately, some other jurisdictions, like for instance in other large Western markets, which we know what we're talking about, right? They are sort of enforcing by prosecution, which doesn't give it regulatory clarity, right? At the end of the day, any innovation comes risks, right? And in the good old days, back in the 90s, I remember when I was in college, I'm that old, I didn't even have internet, right? We have to go to, we have to go to a computer room to use emails at that point in time. And in the late 90s, there were a lot of people who were saying that, who needs the internet, right? We can go to libraries, search information, all that. And everybody went into it in the .com era. Everything .com, you go after the name of that .com makes money. And then there's a big burst of it thereafter, right? And then there are a lot of articles that says the internet is dead, no one needs the internet. Same thing is what people might say when there's a lot of volatility in the Web3 space. But we know that, there's a huge deal. Digital asset ownership is a huge deal. You look at how we spend time, how the youngsters have what they value. They don't value the hard assets anymore. It's a generational shift. So regulations need to catch up to this fact rather than sort of kill the space, right?
Actually, I want to link back to your question on number 3 and the last 2 questions about the copyright and the business model. I want to give an example. For example, if you look at the music that is being played, in restaurants or so on, in karaoke or so on, right? The performers, the lyrics, and the music arrangement will each get a different shares of the money they are generated, right? So usually it's like 70% on the performance and maybe 15% on the lyrics and so on. And it's a fixed fee and is, executed or, make sure it's policed by the government to make sure that this money goes to cash, which is like the composers and, I forgot the whole name, it's like a Composers and Singers Association, something like that, right? But with blockchain, I think one of the good thing about blockchain is that assume in a world that everything is blockchain and everything is like policed by the computers as well, then I can write my music and then I write into my contract or the smart contract that whoever is going to use my music for performances, I can get my shares of the money, but I don't have to rely on, the cash, cash meaning like the Composers Association, on they collecting the money for me, but the money actually goes directly into my wallet, and I can decide what percentage I want or how much money I want. So this is like very far in the future, but I think it's a very, very good thing for all the creators in the future.
Yeah, sorry, I just have to echo that is super important as a point, right? Because of creators' royalties and creator fees are something that we are actively defending as well. Some marketplaces, because of competition, and we know marketplaces are being a little bit commoditized, they've sort of gone in a way of saying that, hey, optional royalty fees and all that. Ultimately, if you're signing towards sort of commoditized NFTs as trading, like almost like a fungible token, I think it damages the space of creativity. It sort of gets to the point where the space is really only heading towards sort of trading volume and speculation. Whereas we're the builders here, we really want to see great use cases. And the people, the creators, artists, gamers, they're not here to just make a living, right? That's part of it. But then ultimately, that royalty that you talk about is super powerful because it really allows the people or creators to enter the space, right? And they want to be here because they're ultimately rewarded through a market discovery mechanism. The first Picasso, right? The first Picasso that he sold is probably not worth a lot. But the last time that same piece of Picasso was sold, it's worth a lot of money, right? But he and his family, never got a cent out of it. Now you put it on the chain, right? It's forever, it's permanent. It really allows real creators to then shape the world, which is what we want ultimately, right?
Okay, fantastic. I think it's very important to eliminate the complex terms such as using NFTs and basically for inclusivity's sake, right? Like for everyone to be included as well. It's more on putting an emphasis on and putting a talk and discussion on what it's really like to own something on the internet. I think that is more value rather than having this force-fed integration of this technology and having more of like a simple onboarding.
It does make sense, yeah. I mean, onboarding is very important, right? That's why you see your solutions. I don't know if Seb talked about onboarding. He thinks about it a lot in Sandbox, and we're also creating a wallet ourselves, a custodian wallet on Web3 called Griffin. Right? And there are a lot of new wallets being built today because the onboarding process is important, right?
All right. We have 2 minutes left. I think we can accommodate a few questions from the audiences. Who has some questions? So who wants to make money in virtual reality? Yeah, okay. Yes, you raise your hand. Yeah, good.
Could you give an example of the best play-to-earn tokenomics? Just an example of the best play-to-earn tokenomics game nowadays.
Well, okay, so tokenomics itself is a study of token economies. So the design of it, is that the question, or do you mean what's the best way to earn tokens?
I mean the name of the project, of the play-to-earn project with the best tokenomics model.
Oh, the best model. I mean, there are lots of good models out there, honestly, right? But the ones that work the best, right, have certain design aspect of it that allows the sinks to be more than the faucets, right, ultimately. So are there more ways to spend the token than are there the emissions of the tokens themselves, right? How are that managed, right? So there are many, many examples of that, right? Ultimately, there is one particular one that we're looking at, that we're designing, that is, again, I don't want to name the names right now, but ultimately it's about there's an in-game economy itself that's a bit of more of a closed economy. And then once it gets converted, once there's a certain gathering of those assets, it can be converted into a external fungible token, but it's sort of time limited. So there's gated process to make sure the in-game economy itself balances and is actually healthy. And then there are gated ways to get the currency out as well as part of the gameplay. And that's, I think, is a very innovative model of looking at things. Now, in the past model, where there's a lot of, shall we say, marketing initially, they either buy the NFTs or buy the tokens, it got pumped very, very quickly. And those tend to be the projects that don't really sustain. And that's what I call the 2021 and early 2022 kind of playbook. And those are the ones that are harder to sort of quote unquote earn money, right? Because those really wouldn't balance.
I think it really depends on what you want to achieve, right? I mean, if you want to achieve like very, very quick increase, obviously, even like in the past, there are a lot of token economies based on the rewards is based on the number of users, right? And obviously, the good thing is that it can explode very fast. I mean, explode meaning like, in getting more users very fast, but at the same time, it might explode very fast as well. And they are obviously much a better one in a way that is, you want more longevity, then the rewards is based on time rather than the number of users. So at the set number of time, then the rewards is definitive, right? And how much rewards is given or tokens is given to the users at the same period of time, no matter how many number of users, right? And on top of that, then there are games that you are seeing actual payers for the game, right? Payers who are actually buying or demanding tokens to increase their power or to increase their whatever powered weapons they have, so that at the same time there are the earners and there are also the payers, right? And and for these ones, frankly, I don't see any successful games as yet, but I think there will be that we'll be able to merge earners and payers, because that happened before in many of the MMORPGs, especially in China. And then on top of that is kind of a loot box type of games, right? So there are a lot of earners, but at the same time, I mean, if you look at Fortnite, right? Fortnite yearly tournament rewards, I think, is basically based on the previous revenue. So they know exactly how much these rewards they can give out, right? So if we use that idea or model for Web3 games or play-to-earn games, so it comes later. So basically, we have the revenue, and then we decide how much players can earn, right? And this type of model basically will probably have a much better longevity, right? So I think it's because I come more from a traditional game development, so I always like use analogy for like the MMORPGs or even Fortnite or some of these games, as a comparison. But I can see that there are a lot of possibilities where we can find longevities in play-to-earn model.
All right, that is literally time. Thank you, good sir, for your question. And Evan and Michael, thank you so much. I had such a pleasure and honor to share the stage with you. There are so many really interesting takeaways from this fireside chat, so it was such an honor. Thank you to WoW Summit, and thank you guys for coming out. I hope you enjoyed the panel.